Hello, Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce members. This is Drew Camp, President and CEO of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce, here for our March 10th, 2023 weekly legislative update. As we've done a lot lately, property tax continues to be a focus point of which we converse a lot about. So I'll start with that. Just to kind of frame things a little bit to start, we average in the bottom 10, or we rank, excuse me, in the bottom 10 for the Tax Foundation's rankings for property tax. Surveys and other things will show that sometimes that's a key concern for folks throughout the state, as far as where they think we need to do some things to be more competitive. As you know, we did some things with income tax and things along those lines in the last few years that have made us more competitive in those rankings. But that's really driven a lot of the conversation and kind of brought to a focal point for the legislature, especially Senator Dawson and the Senate Ways and Means Committee, to look at how maybe we can have positively affect those rankings and maybe move up a little bit in some of those tax foundation rankings as related to property tax as we have with income tax in recent years. So one of the things that we continue to look at and talk about as business organizations is just looking at the growth perspective that's needed and what metrics are there that are placing us there. That's the same thing the legislature is doing, kind of looking at what's putting us in that position. So kind of trying to dig into those specific metrics that they're using to put us in that bottom 10 for property tax and seeing how we can positively impact some of those different pieces, because I think that's really important as we look at as a chamber and a business advocacy organization, but also a partner with our city and county and other school districts, community college, and other taxable entities throughout the community here, how we can best support them, as well as advocate for a competitive tax system. So really kind of looking at those different pieces as to how we can specifically target those at the state level, but then also including a growth perspective, because if you have any knowledge of what's been put forward by the Senate, it's really that 2.5% growth threshold. And as we talked about 2 weeks ago at our legislative roundtable, just really, is there going to be a tie to CPI, the Consumer Price Index, or another inflationary index? Is there going to be a consideration given to the growth of the community with regards to population growth and obviously taxable valuation as a result? So that's something that we're also talking about and wanting to just make sure that as we look at making ourselves more competitive in the tax side of things, but also making sure that we're providing the support that our local taxing entity partners need as well. Another thing that we need to make sure that we're doing in these conversations is just need to make sure that we're looking to innovate and be creative to expand local government resources. Senator Dawson has said this in meetings. He said it, at our meetings. He said it in other meetings throughout the state, is just providing some information for them, kind of going back to those metrics pieces of what can we actually do to have a tangible impact and make an impact in property tax, but also maybe provide some other concessions, for lack of a better term, to local government and tax and entities that may give them some more flexibility or may allow them to be more creative to utilize some funds to prop up their local budgets. So that's something obviously we look to our partners at those community taxing entities as to what that may look like, because obviously they have the most insight there. So that's something we'll continue to do, is have those conversations and connect them to the appropriate individuals at the state level, just to make sure that some of those considerations can be put into place. So if there are changes like a growth cap or things like that, what are some other pieces down the line that may be benefits to those taxing entities that they can use to remain competitive and make sure that they're remaining strong budgetarily and not having to do cuts or anything along those lines, and provide those services and amenities that their community members have come to expect from them as the public body. One thing that's going to be really important to watch, and it's the last thing I'll say on property tax, is just that our assessments are going to be coming out here this month. So really kind of seeing what impact that has as we see what those percentages may be throughout the state. So that's something that's going to be very important as well. Another thing that received a lot of focus at the state legislature this week, if you kind of keep up and watch kind of what's happening coming out of subcommittees and some of the press with the folks that are there every day, is really some of the social issues. That's something that we as chambers watch insofar as how it impacts talent and workforce. So really the biggest thing we're going to do is, obviously, before we're inserting ourselves into any of those social issues debates, we're going to make sure that we have tangible evidence and knowledge and factor in how it's going to impact our workforce and how it may specifically call out the Regents institutions or K through 12 or community colleges or something along those lines. That can obviously change how we view something as well. So that's something that we'll continue to monitor, and we'll obviously always, like I said, look at it from a talent perspective and what it's going to allow, how it may allow us to positively or negatively attract and retain talent. With regards to youth employment, this is a bill that has drawn some attention, largely because just of the way it's been framed in some ways and shapes and forms, with some of the younger individuals, say down to about 14 years old, being able to work in restaurants, being able to work obviously in grocery stores. They already are, but maybe looking at some of those pieces, but then also bars, restaurants, hospitality, hotels, things like that. So the biggest hang up right now politically is really just trying to clean up this piece about the access and handling of alcohol. And what I mean by that is, at a hotel or at a restaurant where the primary product is not alcohol, that's not as much of a concern. Whereas if you're at a bar or an establishment where the primary product is alcohol, that's something where some folks have raised a little bit of a flag. So what we're doing is kind of just taking an undecided approach on it to monitor it. We think that there may be an amendment coming that'll address some of those pieces with as far as the access and purposeful intent of what alcohol, what the purpose and use of alcohol is at a respective establishment. We think there might be some cleanup there, so we'll continue to watch that before making any determination as to moving to a positive opinion of it. But we do know this, that it's hugely impactful to our folks in grocery, into hospitality and hotels, and in travel and tourism, and then also our restaurants. So that's something, as we talk to those folks we hear consistently, and when I bring it up to them, they consistently say that would be extremely helpful. We know what we would need to do to protect ourselves in regards to some of those pieces I talked about before, but just give us the opportunity to do so. So that's something we're going to continue to watch. And most likely, if we get those concessions or those considerations for that handling of alcohol and things like that, we'll most likely move from an undecided to a support vote on that and try to move forward in that regard to help the workforce of those key industries that we have here in our community. So with that, I'll just end by saying that our next legislative roundtable is actually not going to be on Friday. Just as a reminder, it will be on Saturday, March 25th from 9 to 10:30 a.m. at Wilson Auditorium. It'll be open to the public. It will be free of charge. So that's something we want to see how that is done. We're looking forward to the fact that we should have a couple more legislators join us. We thank very much Senator Dawson and Representative Segrist and Representative Tuart for consistently being at those. But I believe we'll have a wider swath of our representation there as well, which is obviously always a good thing to get some additional perspective and insight based on their committees and different expertise that they may have as well. And the other thing I will say is that we also did move our legislative reception from February 15th. If you recall, there was some weather that was an issue at that time. So we moved it to the evening of March 29th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Embassy Suites in the East Village. And it'll also tie in to Leadership Council Bluffs Government Day. So we'll have the leadership class there as well. And then the final thing I will say is that's also funnel week. This next funnel will be March 31st. And what that means is bills that have passed out of the House committees or the Senate committees will then have to have passed that chamber and passed a respective committee and the opposing chamber to stay alive outside of appropriations, ways and means, and leadership and government oversight bills. So definitely a lot going on in the next few weeks, and paired in there with those assessments that I talked about earlier. So there will definitely be plenty going on and plenty to talk about in the coming weeks. And we look forward to that as we kind of look at the last 6 weeks or so of the legislative session for this year. So with that, I will end this week's legislative update. And as I always do, just thank you for your ongoing participation, engagement, and support of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce. Have a nice rest of the day.